Three. Hello, everybody. This is Eric, aka Wolfbitten, and this is a very good friend of mine. I respect his intelligence, his scholarly walk through his life. He is a man of immense knowledge. Uh, Kevin Rice, and tonight's program is going to be very interesting. As you know, there's since for a while now, we've had tons of controversy over the scriptures, who wrote them, what order were they written in, and all of this ridiculous, in my opinion, ridiculous controversy. And tonight, Kevin is here to show us why we can have faith that this was written by Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and we can be assured of this. So, Kevin, thank you so very much, my friend, for coming on tonight.
Thanks for having me on.
It is truly a pleasure. And it's been a long time since we've been on this sort of a thing together. So I'm very, very glad to have you.
Yes, this is going to be fun.
So I'm just going to let you have the floor, brother, and you take off with this.
Okay, so now what usually happens is people who get into learning about the scriptures on an academic level, if they've been living with and praying with and meditating on and reading and getting to know the sacred texts spiritually and as part of their walk of faith, they often come up surprised, shocked to find out what the atmosphere of academia is like. And it's not just simply that they doubt the stories and the texts. It's not just that they doubt that God exists or that miracles happened. They do doubt all of those things, but that's not what leaves them coming up short so often. Often they are surprised at some of the things that are being presented to them as facts about the text that, of course, fits very neatly in with the academic atmosphere of materialism and denial of spirituality and faith and miracles and that sort of thing. But as facts, they make people of faith really scratch their heads. One thing that has really encapsulated this is the controversy about who wrote the various books of the Bible, especially the New Testament, and when, and what's generally what's presented to people as fact. Now, nobody presents this as if it's disputed. Nobody acts as if this is really a theory. And the fact, for instance, when it comes to the Gospels, the fact given is that Mark wrote his gospel first, or Mark's gospel was written first. Not that Mark wrote it. They're not really having anything to do with that because they don't want to give any credit to that either. But they'll say that the gospel attributed to Mark was written first, and then the other two synoptic gospels, Matthew and Luke, were written afterwards. And usually they'll say that they were written independently of each other, separately. By different faith communities. Like Matthew had nothing to do with Matthew. That's just a pious legend. Luke had nothing to do with Luke. That's just another myth. But these documents had Mark, the gospel attributed to Mark, as one of the parents, and these were separated children, so to speak, of Mark and another parent document that they call Quelle, and it means source. But then no one's ever found or even agreed on what's fully agreed in a consensus on what's in Q, right? Everybody has a different idea of what makes up Q because it's not real. It's imagined. It's a purely hypothetical document. It's the whole point of it is to just plug a hole in a theory. And so Mark is supposed to be first, and the reason that they give that it's first is because it's the shortest. So they said, Well, Mark was written first, and then Matthew and Luke each separately expanded on Mark. Okay, using another source, which might have been the so-called Gospel of Thomas, or I mean, some kind of sayings document. They can't really figure out really what went into it because it's really what it is it's supposed to fill in a gap in the theory because you see, Mark contains material, and this is why the initial idea that just because it was shorter doesn't, I mean, that doesn't mean that it was first. Mark contains a lot of material that isn't in Matthew, and it has a lot of material that isn't in Luke. Sometimes it has stuff that's in Matthew but not in Luke, and vice versa. And some of the stuff, um, and there's some material that Matthew and Luke contain that isn't in Mark. So they need some sort of gap document to fill in this theory to make it work, and so they came up with Q, and it's just an imaginary thing to make it work. But um, Mark, although it's shorter, it's the various narratives that it contains are often longer. The pericope in there, they call them, um, the stories, so to speak, are longer, and they contain material that you find in both in one. Some of it, they contain some material that you find in Matthew and some material that you find in Luke, but that Matthew and Luke don't share, and that's where Q is supposed to come in to fill in that gap.
So let me see if I got this straight, Kevin. And what they're saying is that as far as the Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John goes, none of them were really attributable to Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John. And
Yeah, they won't even talk. That when it comes to the synoptics, they consider John to be way, just out of left field and completely. They would put that. They would like to put that in the second century. They would like to make that a Gnostic document. I'm sure if they could get away with it. And they used to say that sort of thing, and they're having a harder time now, because there are careful scholars who are saying no. They're getting pushback, which is good.
and
The synoptics are a separate issue because they're called synoptics because you can read them side by side. You can optically take them in all at the same time, and so you see how they each cover a lot of the same ground. So Mark has a lot of material that's in Matthew and Luke, and all of them contain material in each other. And John is separate. John tells a story in a very different way, and so it's right. So it's a different category.
They're saying that there was a document that predated the Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and John, and that they refer to this as Q. It's mythological. They have no reason to believe this.
Yeah, there's no material evidence whatsoever.
None. That we don't have any evidence of it in fragments or anything, and yet they're insisting that Mark was written first, and it was based on that. And that Luke and Matthew were written later, and they expanded on that same document. Am I understanding this right?
That's the theory. It doesn't really fit the facts very well because, like I said, in Mark, what we see is expand in the individual narratives, the individual stories that it contains, expansions on Matthew and Luke.
Yes,
not the other way around. So the only reason Mark is shorter is because there are narratives in Matthew and narratives in Luke that Mark simply does not contain, and that's why Mark is shorter. Not that Matthew and Luke are expanding on Mark at all. The only way one could even say that they're expanding on them is that they contain these other narratives, like say the infancy narratives.
Well, that's just a desperate push, in my opinion, man.
Mine too, and the criticisms of it's called the Markan hypothesis, rightly so, but they don't tell you it's a hypothesis when you're going to these introductory classes in theology and biblical criticism. They present it as if it's a fact. If they call it a hypothesis, they'll say that that's just an artifact. It's just a name. It's a label. It's what we call it, but it's not true. That's all it is. It really is just a hypothesis, and not a very good one.
That's one reason. Now, I don't take this wrong, because I respect people that have sat through theological courses and then on top of that done their own study. I find that highly respectable. not to just sit in the box that they put you in, but
Right.
to expand on what they teach you. But the reason I never went to seminary, I'll tell you, I kept having preachers or churches saying, "Look, if you can preach in our denomination, be a part of our circuit, and make a comfortable living and everything if you'll just go to our seminary." And I borrowed some of those seminary books because I didn't feel led to go. And I thought I'd give it a fair chance. I looked at these books, and it seemed to me like most of these books are written solely to instill doubt in the believer.
I came away with the very same impressions when I saw a lot of those books, even going back to when I was a child and I got my first Bible for my Holy Communion as a Catholic. And my first Bible was a St. Joseph edition New American Bible. And I didn't just read the text, I read the liners notes. I read stuff on the bottom to help understand that. The whole point is to help understand the text, because otherwise I felt like this is terra incognita for me. I need a map here. But the liner notes, they looked like they were written by unbelievers for unbelievers. That's really the way it seemed to me. I was like, did you people even believe this stuff?
Yes, yes. Yeah, some of the things I was reading, like they would read a verse about, or there would be a verse about Abraham, and then in the book would say we have no archaeological evidence that Abraham ever existed. You know, little things like this, just crazy stuff. Huh.
Right. And I mean, knowing that doesn't really help you understand the narrative.
No.
And it makes you think, well, yeah, that's bad. But wait, would we have archaeological evidence for one individual man thousands of years ago?
Yeah.
Where would you find, what would that even look like? Are
You know,
you going to test the DNA? What does that even mean?
yeah, people that try to use an argument like that, I try to point out the fact of our Alexander the Great. Nobody doubts his existence, and the earliest known writing we have from him may have originated in the second or third century, but uh, the earliest known extant copies
Right, the
we have
copy.
of it
Right.
are from like the 9th and 10th and 11th centuries.
That's right. Which is what we really should expect.
Yeah.
I mean, that's all we should expect. But yeah, I mean, if we had the same standards of skeptical doubt for everything, we wouldn't really have an ancient history at all.
Yeah, so
Wouldn't
we have
we would know we
huge,
would be happy content to really know nothing.
yeah, we have a huge double standard going on. In other words, so you know, as I have no problem believing in Alexander or some of the people before him, Genghis Khan and whoever came along after that. But I don't understand. Well, I guess I do. It seems to me like from time immemorial, people have been trying to contradict or corrupt God's word from the very beginning. Hath God not said, "Ye shall not eat of all these trees"?
Mm.
Yeah.
Well, what I'll be talking about is how much politics and really literally Caesar, in a way, had to do with with the corruption of the faith and the spreading of doubt about the origin of these texts in order to spread doubts about the faith for for the purpose of hoarding their own power over and against the church for whatever, I mean, for good reasons or bad. That's what they did.
Yeah, that I found that when you were explaining this to me several days ago or a week ago or whenever this was, I was fascinated by this. I mean, it's a fascinating journey. So go ahead and start explaining some of this,
Sure.
folks.
So back in the 1870s, uh, Pius IX got it into his head to consolidate his power because he was losing territory big time. He had various princes all over, separate states in the Italian peninsula, because there was no Kingdom of Italy at the time. They coveted the Papal States. They coveted that territory, and in order to consolidate his power, one of the things that he did was he said he got it into his head, well, to say, look, well, I've already declared the Immaculate Conception to be a dogma infallibly. I explicitly invoked my infallibility to do this, to declare this authoritatively. But the thing is, the Church never actually declared my infallibility as the Pope infallibly. So we're kind of putting the cart before the horse. Let me correct this. So he calls the First Vatican Council together, and one of the things that he solemnly defines as his own infallibility. And he had a lot of really top-notch, very loyal, faithful, devout, not doubters, real devout Catholics saying, Holy Father, please don't do this. Please don't do this. Because it's just, it doesn't matter if it's true. It's imprudent, and people are inevitably going to get the wrong idea about how to apply this. So please don't. And he was like, I'm going to do it anyway. So he did. Now, this made various secular governments in Europe that were, all part of the big Game of Thrones that was going on at the time. And it was because they're in an aftermath of, a few decades ago, there were revolutions that swept across Europe, in France and Italy and Germany, just everywhere. And a lot of them failed. A lot of them failed. They started at the same time, seeming mysteriously and independently, and then failed overnight. So all of these, kings, they're very nervous. They're seeing the aristocracy lose power, just by the day, and how they had been for centuries, really. But especially in those recent decades, and so they're all very nervous. Everybody's operating on fear and hoarding their power. In Germany, where the major seminaries, especially the Protestant seminaries, were located, and where a lot of the academic theories that informed theology, in those seminaries, there was a lot of government control at the time, even in the Catholic seminaries.
Now, let me emphasize to the people watching too that you're not bashing Catholicism because you're speaking as a Catholic.
Yes, I am. Yes. Yeah, I mean, I don't even dispute papal infallibility, although by the end of this, I'll probably qualify that. But I don't dispute it. And so, not disputing it, I have no trouble accepting it as a Catholic, right? But anyway, so there's a lot of state control, a lot of control of the German state, the Prussian state, in the various seminaries. They're the ones who make all the appointments. They're the ones who. Oh, hang on 1 second. It's no problem. That was my mom. Okay. All right. Yeah. She thought she had left the light on, but it's me. So yeah, she's really sweet. So okay. So back to us. Okay. So the basically the universities, the seminaries, they're all under control of the state. Professors get their appointments by the state. Even in the seminaries, even Catholic seminaries are subject to that, because there are these old treaties called concordats between the papacy and the imperial German Kaiser type government, where they basically said, yes, you get to be the boss of a bishop, but we get to appoint the bishops. These were old. That doesn't happen anymore. But those were the rule that they were operating under. Now, when the Pope declared papal infallibility, the Kaiser and his chancellor, Otto von Bismarck, got very nervous. And they were worried because a lot of their population was Catholic. And what they were seeing from their perspective was Pope Pius IX, a foreign dictator, a foreign head of state, making inroads into the loyalties of German Catholics, so that they would have a double loyalty. They would have their loyalty to the Kaiser, but also their loyalty to the Pope. And the Pope was like, mine's the best because I'm infallible, see, right?
Right.
So they're very nervous. They're not liking this at all. And so right around, hold on, let me just find. Oh yeah, so right around the year 1874, a scholar named Heinrich Julius Holtzmann gets him appointed to a prestigious chair of New Testament studies at the University of Strasbourg. And there wasn't really much going for him. There wasn't really a good reason why he was there. But what happened as a result was he promoted Markan priority, and by that appointment, and by suppressing other appointments and other grants, and whatever, they were able to promote Markan priority and suppress the previous majority, scholarly majority position. What had been up to that point the majority position among scholars, which was Johann Greisbach's theory that put Matthew first. They were able to suppress that and promote this new Markan priority theory. Now, why, you might want to know, why would they want to do that, and what in the world would that have to do with the Pope declaring his infallibility? Well, let me explain. So the thing is, the German state was officially Protestant, right, at that time.
Right.
Not so much, but officially, right? And so there was this basic idea that, well, we've got to sort of be Christian, and we got to sort of acknowledge the Bible. Now, the Pope goes and declares this infallibility, and his proof text is in Matthew. I think was Matthew 16:12. I'm trying to find which one that is. 16. Let me just look this up. I should have that up. Okay. Maybe it was. No, it's not. No, maybe it was 12:16. Hold on. Let me just look up. Okay, the Peter on this rock. Okay. All right. So I don't know why. Oh, 16:18. Okay. Matthew 16:18. So now so that was the proof text that Pius IX used in Pastor Aeternus in Vatican I, where he declares himself infallible. The idea was, Jesus said to Peter, on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it. And I give you the keys, plural, of the kingdom of Hades. And no, it was keys to the kingdom of heaven. Hades is, I forget what's going on. Okay. No, it was because Hades would not prevail against it, right? He gave you the keys to the kingdom of heaven. Whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven. Whatever you loose on earth will be loose in heaven. So binding and loosing authority. This is an old rabbinical tradition about how authority works. And so he was, at least in this proof text, giving Peter a certain eminence over the other disciples that the Pope was exploiting, because he's the apostolic successor of Peter, going back all the way to Pope Linus the First, the first official apostolic successor of Peter and Bishop of Rome at the time. There were other successors of Peter, because Antioch and Alexandria both were Petrine sees. He founded those too. So there's it's actually three separate lines of succession, but that complicates things, and you're not going to see anything in Vatican I about that either. But the Pope being a successor of Peter, so he's got the keys, right? And so this supposedly means if he can settle all controversies, he's got to be able to do it infallibly. So that's the argument, that if he can settle all the controversies and say this is what the Church Catholic teaches, he's got to be able to do that without making mistakes. That's the argument. And so he's infallible, right?
Yeah.
And now the German state is very nervous about this. So they're like, how can we undermine this without basically saying Christianity is bunk? What can we do to undercut this? Because we want to stay Protestant, right? So, so they said, well, what if Matthew wasn't written by Matthew? What if it wasn't written by an apostle? Oh, how can we do that? Well, what if Matthew was the text of that gospel wasn't wasn't written first, but was based on a previous gospel that no one thought was written by an apostle? Then no one would think that the text of Matthew was written by an apostle, written by a first-hand eyewitness. And if it's not first-hand eyewitness testimony, where it differs, you can just reject the part that doesn't have corroboration. You can just reject that whole text where the keys are given to Peter. That's made up, right?
Right.
So Matthew becomes this. Its witness has to be undermined. So it's undermined by making it derivative of Mark, which supposedly no one thinks has apostolic authority. Now, of course, you have to undermine Mark's authority. Mark is, according to tradition, Peter's secretary. So it has Petrine authority. In fact, Mark, remember I just mentioned Alexandria and Antioch were Petrine sees also.
Right.
Mark is the first pope of the Coptic Church for that reason. In their line of succession, it goes back to Mark. He founded their see because Peter installed him there. So yeah, so that when they undermine Matthew by putting it under Mark, they're not really doing that's what actually this is why Christians were able to get hornswoggled by this, because they were just able to say, well, it doesn't matter who's first. If it was Mark, then it was Mark, right? But the way the people who were masterminding this, what their original motivations were, it's to undercut Matthew and undercut Matthew's authority, and therefore undercut the authority of the Pope as this infallible, monarch with these keys that give him the power to bind and loose, right?
So this was basically a holy war, so to speak.
Oh yeah. It was basically it was called Culture Comp, and it was declared formally by Otto von Bismarck, the Iron Chancellor. And basically, it was a game of 3D chess between him and Pope Pius IX. That's what it was. And it involved a lot of moving pieces and a lot of things that you wouldn't think had anything to do with anything, because it wasn't supposed to be, and it wasn't, a war of actual, fighting, of actual violence. It was a culture war.
Yeah.
Right.
So let me ask one question, and we'll get right back to where you're going with this. But is this something that I know that it's pretty rampant that the Protestant church pretty much buys all of this stuff that you're talking about? Is the same so with the Catholic Church today?
Yeah. Yes. If not worse.
Okay.
Because at least among evangelical Protestants, you'll find that there's a decent subculture that has a lot of doubts about this academic consensus.
Yeah.
A lot of really good sources on it come from evangelicals. However, to take some credit for the Catholics, so William R. Farmer, who wrote a lot of good stuff, he's a Protestant, but he also based some of his work on a Catholic named Dom Bernard Orchard, who was a Benedictine.
Okay.
And actually, they worked with each other, and each based their work on the other in various ways. But so there is a subculture among Catholic scholarship and among evangelical Protestant scholarship that wants to stick a thumb in the eye of this rubbish academic consensus.
And right.
But for the most part, the consensus still stand in both of those cultures. There's still a lot of Protestant seminaries that teach this basically as alternative, as its own gospel, and same thing more so, I think, among Catholics. It's like maybe in some place like Franciscan University of Steubenville, where I went, you might find a sympathetic ear to some of these alternative theories, but they're still just alternative theories, even there.
Well, how did this go from the Bismarck kind of proclaiming this, just off the wall proclaiming this, to catching on like wildfire through?
It's a bit mysterious,
yeah.
But to the extent that this makes any sense, what happened was, by suppressing the previous theory and completely and very effectively replacing it with what had once been fringe, they became the new orthodoxy, the new academic orthodoxy, and then academic reputations and scholarly reputations began to be dependent on this new orthodoxy, and everybody who was training had to be trained in the new orthodoxy. There was no room for dissent.
Wow. That's just crazy. That's just insane. And this was happening right around the, what, 1860s, 70s?
The culture comp lasted from the early to late 1870s, but had there were little echoes of it, little aftershocks of it into the 1880s. But by the time that was all through, the new academic orthodoxy was really fully, on board. It was fully established, and there was really no way for to bring back Greisbach's interpretation without just getting laughed out of the room at that point, because everybody knew that was rubbish.
Let me say hello, just a shout out to Kevin's Biblical Discussions. Good to see you, my friend, and welcome. I'm glad you're dropped in today. And this is Kevin. So, Kevin, this is just a fascinating subject. It really is. And what I find interesting is that, isn't it also about this time that we started having other dissension regarding the books of Moses, for instance?
Julius Wellhausen, hold on, because I have a tab of his book. The Prolegomena to the History of Israel, and he wrote that in the 1870s. And when he first wrote that, it was in German. It was controversial, and because it was at least ostensibly Protestant, they were like, don't teach this. But over time, it got to get more and more of a sympathetic ear. There was a little bit more of a leeway among the academic authorities to say, well, we can accept this as one of the hypotheses of how this works. And so the camel's nose got under the tent eventually. And in 1885, the Prolegomena appeared in English, and so it went. And after that, by that time, it was all over the academic world. Hold on, I have to plug in my laptop. 1 second. But yeah, by that time, it was all over the academic world, and it was being established as another de facto orthodoxy. And by the time I was reading my New American Bible St. Joseph edition, it was, again, it might as well have been considered a fact that the J and E and D and P were the authors, not Moses.
Yeah, very similar stories when it comes right down to it. Whether it's the dating and the authorship of the New Testament, down to the dating and authorship of the books of Moses.
Yes. The patterns are they would be uncanny, but it just goes to show that the kind of mind that comes up with these sort of alternative hypotheses, they recycle ideas.
And it seems to me like a perfect trifecta too, when you throw in the fact that right about this time we also have the Westcott work being written, and based on the Alexandrian manuscripts, and that these have supplanted the Textus Receptus of the King James version.
Yeah.
So it looks like they're taking away the deity of Christ, casting doubt on. Of course, they completely removed 1 John 5:7.
Right. Yes, they took out the Johannine camera. Yes.
Yeah, and other verses like that, just changed them. And then we have casting doubt on the New Testament, casting doubt on the Old Testament, and rewriting all of this. There's an interesting book that was written by. Um, I've read portions of it. I didn't read the whole thing. I found it disgusting. It was written by either the children or the grandchildren of Westcott and Hort,
Mm.
and it deals with the correspondence between Westcott and Hort during this time period. And they make some very damning comments about, they hated orthodoxy
Wow.
and that they wanted to change long held traditions in the church
Mm.
and change the long held teachings in the church, doctrines.
Mm.
And that's what they were implicitly out to do. And that if people, of course, there were a lot of people that were very, very committed to God back then and to His Word. They said that if people found out what they were up to, they would be lynched.
Yeah,
Right in
well, in
their
that
own
respect, it's probably
correspondence.
true.
Yeah,
That's probably true.
yeah.
Mhm.
So we're talking about a time period where there's an amazing war going on, basically, against the Word of God. But of course, I think that war's been going on ever since His first word to mankind. So,
Yeah.
but go right ahead, brother. I don't mean to interrupt you. I'm just
Right. Oh, okay. So, all right. So, uh, what do you call it? Let me just figure out my place. So, Culture Comp gets basically declared, and it's basically a mess. There's a lot of stuff going on, and from the outside, it's very difficult to see how either side is advancing their cause by doing what they do. But it makes sense more when you step back from it. But it's very messy. It's very much like hold on, let me just see if I can find. All right, it's very messy, and it's just they're doing weird stuff now. Um, Here's an example of what I'm talking about. So in 1870, there's a um, there's a theologian named Dr. Woolman. We don't really History doesn't even record his first name. This guy, he he really got the shaft. This poor guy. He was really in the wrong place at the wrong time, and he was employed by the German state as a Catholic teacher of religion in what they called the Gymnasium of Braunberg in East Prussia. And he's there to teach Catholicism, to teach the Catechism. However, Vatican I happens, and then Pastor Eternus is put out, and he's got to say, okay, well, how do I present this? And so he starts talking about, you know, what just happened. It's part of Catholicism now; it's dogma, right? And um, and they now, because the German state, which is not okay with this, is employing him. They're like, no, when you don't get to do that. He's like, but I'm teaching Catholicism. So they said, no, no, no. Tell you what, because we employ the bishops too, we pay them too. So you do this, you keep this up, you're going to get excommunicated. Excommunicated. This is Catholicism. The Pope just you know try it and see. So he does, and he f's around and finds out, right? Because he winds up getting excommunicated by the German bishops at the behest of the German government against the will of the Pope.
wow. That's
So right, so the thing is, this is messy and it affects everyone. It turned several areas of Poland into ghettos because there was a German government attaché at the time that was running those things, and they decided, oh, you're Catholic, well, we're going to punish you. I mean, all sorts of stuff was going on. It was really very messy, and by the time Pius IX dies and Leo XIII gets becomes the next pope, he he has to betray of a lot of German Catholics just to better the conditions of the Polish because of the aftermath of culture conflict. It's very messy. The whole thing is really it was a hideous time, and one of the uh, one of the casualties was biblical orthodoxy because we we lost our anchor in tradition. We lost our faith that tradition was a good witness to the history of the texts of the Bible, of the various books of the Bible. Paul now had a non-rewritten Paul. The apostles and apostolic men like Mark and Luke had to have not written the Gospels, right? This became the new orthodoxy.
Brother, I'm not sure if it's you or me, but I think something might have happened to your volume. I can hear you, but it went down and got kind of tinny.
Okay, hang on. Is it better when I hold up my device like this? I guess not.
I think it's slightly better, but
let me turn it off. Turn off the micro and turn it back on again.
Okay.
How's this?
Yeah, it's about the same. Folks in the audience there, can you let me make sure you can hear Kevin, because this could be my problem. So just let us know if you hear Kevin as good as you did before.
Yeah, I'll just keep talking so they can let you know. All right. So I mean, basically that was the story. That it started with something that you wouldn't think it started with, and it had consequences that last even to the present day. That it causes people who become who try to become academically learned in biblical texts as part of their faith journey and their love of God. They wind up running into these obstacles. It might be my connection. Maybe my Wi-Fi connection is bad. I'm gonna try and jump out and jump back in and see if that helps.
So he's speaking. Kevin is, let me remind you, speaking as a Catholic. And thank you, guys. Now here he comes back again.
Yeah. How do I sound now?
That's much better.
Excellent. It just needed. We needed to turn it off and on again, as they say in whatever that, I can't remember the name of that show. It'll come to me later. But that's what I had to jump out and jump back in. That's all.
Well, welcome back, brother, and I'm glad that's fixed. We can pick right up.
Right.
And, so this is a fascinating subject, brother. It seems to me that we see a definite conspiracy of sorts going on now. Whether or not all of these things people were conspiring with one another to bring doubt, that I don't think we can make a case for that. I don't know. But I think that there are people that were involved in each of these three separate things that happened, that caused it to become conspiratorial, all three events. I think you could call all three events. I know, judging from the correspondence I saw between Westcott and Mr. Hort, they in fact mentioned their conspiracy. And they called it a conspiracy. So, that's all you need is two.
Well, yeah, and I mean, if it's just the two of them, that's still them conspiring, right? At the very least, even
Absolutely,
if they had no one else involved.
exactly. But then you have to ask, well, is it possible that there were other people involved, like the people that published uh, their their their
Right.
great
No,
conspiracy?
anything worthwhile takes more than one person to do, or more, or a pair of persons working together to do. I mean,
Yeah, a
lots of-
publisher might see great money, a lot of money in something like that, for instance. So now, do you think that there were? Uh, let's talk the conspiratorial side of this for a second. When you get to the doubts cast on the authorship and the dates and times of the New Testament, and then the same with the Old Testament, the Mosaic books. Do you think you can make a case for conspiracy in those two arenas?
well, uh, it was. I think it was bigger than a conspiracy at the time. There was a German subculture that was really itching for it was very anti-Semitic, and it was really itching for what Wellhausen had to give them. And so I think they were just you hardly needed a smoke-filled back room because at that time the fashion of opinion was such that people were very open to it. Um, and so when they had a scholar saying these things, they were apt to say, "Well, look, this scholar is saying these things that we already suspected to be true." You know, and so yes, if it undermines certain Jewish claims about their sacred texts, well, good, because we don't think very highly of them, right? So, I mean, sure, there could have been multiple conspiracies for the same reason that there didn't even need to be one.
Yeah, that's just amazing. So, um, it's obvious that they're getting away with this, and it's obvious that I like the fact that you pointed out at the very beginning that these things are now accepted as fact, even though there's not the least bit of evidence for it. So, how
Yeah.
how how, how are
Yes.
they getting away with this? Other than if I can fall back on an old saying, the only thing necessary for evil to prosper is that good men do nothing.
Yeah.
But who is actually defending, rising today to defend the authorship of these books?
Yeah. Well, that's a good question, and I can help with that. Okay, so I have some sources from those who are doing their little part that they can. I mean, they're they're fighting against a very high tide. There's just a lot of inertia now behind the 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 so-called new orthodoxy that was you know basically brought about by German state interference in the 1870s. But there is a significant school of dissent that promotes the earlier Johann Greifswald hypothesis, which put Matthew first in accordance with patristic witness, and then Luke as second, and then Mark as derivative of Matthew and Luke. And here is one text that explores that. Uh, the one gospel from two, Mark's use of Matthew and Luke, a demonstration by the research team of the International Institute for Gospel Studies, edited by David B. Peabody with Lamar Cope and Alan J. Nickel. So this is a great source. And it goes over all the various ways that instead of um, Mark being derivative of Matthew and Luke, Mark becomes, sorry, Matthew and Luke being derivative of Mark, the other way around. How each, how Matthew used some of Mark and Luke used some of Mark. And then when you have it that way, especially if they were not fully isolated from each other, They might each have known about each other. Maybe Luke might have used Matthew, and then Mark used both. When you have that, you don't need Q. You don't need that
Right.
hypothesis at all. So that's, I mean, just on sheer Occam's razor principle, on that principle alone, this should be the dominant theory because it just works better, right?
When we were talking about this before, too, I think that one of the important points that you brought up was that if there were such a controversy, then back in the first and second century, we would have surely read about it. There would have been a stink in the church over all of this, and surely this would have been a controversial thing from the first century on up through the Middle Ages. But as much as I've read about the things that were taught in the early church and in up through the Middle Ages and etc., this was never an issue.
That's
This
right.
was never brought up as an issue.
Right. The patristic witness in the early church of who wrote the four gospels, they're all unanimous. Nobody disputes that the gospel that we attribute to Matthew was written by Matthew, that the gospel that we attribute to Luke was written by Luke. I mean, it's pretty much a cinch because he also wrote Acts, and he pretty much identifies himself.
Yes.
That John wrote John. I mean, you keep seeing. I keep seeing people calling these documents anonymous documents. That's just rubbish. That's just a lie. When they're saying that, they're lying because these documents have never been circulated without names attached to them. That's just a thing that never happened.
Yes. Yes. Surely we would have read about it through Polycarp, Eusebius, and all of these people.
Right. They would have been disputing who wrote what.
Exactly.
But there's no dispute.
Exactly. As a matter of fact, I pulled up a little quote by that's attributed to Polycarp, and this comes from Irenaeus. He says, and I quote, "But Polycarp also was not only instructed by apostles and conversed with many who had seen Christ, but was also by apostles in Asia appointed bishop of the church of Smyrna, whom I also saw in my early youth. For he tarried on earth a very long time, and when a very old man gloriously and nobly suffering martyrdom departed this life, having always taught the things which he had learned from the apostles, which the church has handed down, and which alone are true." So this is from Irenaeus, and he's speaking specifically of Polycarp, who learned from the apostles. And nowhere. Now, this is a direct line to the apostles. And nowhere do we have this controversy arising in history. Nowhere.
Right. That's right. That's right. It's just made up. They're just making it up.
So, as easy as this is to debunk, it's amazing that we have so many people still pushing it.
Yeah, it really is. It's that these terrible, ridiculous, fake news theories have got legs and kept them for so long, and still to today, just it's, to me, real proof that the devil is alive and well on planet Earth, as how Lindsay's old book title put it.
Amen.
I mean, the hell is active because they have to be giving boosts to some of the stuff that naturally just wouldn't be able to compete in a marketplace of ideas because it's so lacking in support, and so its contents is just so worthless. It's dreck.
Yes. That's just, and the fact that it has taken off, I think, is a sad indictment on not just our church leadership, but the church people. we should trust that power corrupts, and so we should trust that we need to be checked where we're being led. We need to make sure of what we're being taught. That's on us.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, we believers do have to, unfortunately. Yeah, we don't live in a society that makes these things easy on us. They're not support. It's not supporting us.
That's
So
true.
we have to get stronger. We have to be able to. We have to do without. We have to do without that. We have to do without that societal support. A lot of that support came with other costs based on certain corruptions. So, in some ways, we're better off without them. But we're not better in. It's not. We're not better without qualifications, right? I mean, it's an unqualified better, and the qualifications are we're worse off in many ways. But if we take that up, if we take up that responsibility, and we do that, and we do what we need to do, we can then be on a. When we don't have to be on this, we don't have to ask for a level playing field. We can be above. We can be above the field now.
Yes.
So, and that puts us in better stead, I think, because then we're not. We have a certain degree of skepticism. That's a very good tool to have. That we wouldn't necessarily have if we had a lot of societal support, because people who are fed an orthodoxy, and who were up until say the 1870s, who were told this is how the Bible says, and this is what the church says, and this is here's all their ducks put in a row. You know, they were taught some things that weren't true also, but they couldn't distinguish those from the truth because it all came together.
Yeah.
You know, so that put them that put them behind the eight ball when certain things started to fall apart. So, and it's still going on now. It's really still going on now. I was just today in a Twitter conversation with a former traditionalist Catholic who he's undergone a crisis of faith because, among other things, this infallibility of the Catholic Church has not, and the infallibility of the Pope has not lived up to the label that he was taught. It has not it has not lived up to the hype. Okay, and so even insofar as there's any truth to those doctrines, they don't really do what they were supposed to do for him, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is the kind of thing that I'm talking about. I mean, all of his beliefs were held together in this system, and the system broke down.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's indicative, I believe, of someone whose faith is not exactly in the right place. You know, um, but this is good that sort of faith be shaken, so that
Yeah,
we
he
learn.
thinks so. I mean, it's been painful for him, but he thinks so. He feels like he's waking up.
Yeah, it's only when faith in the wrong thing is shaken that we can come to the fact, to the knowledge that, hey, our faith should be in Christ. Our faith should be in His Word. And if there's anything we're going to trust as infallible, let's trust that. Now, let me qualify that. I don't know of a perfect translation anywhere. Anytime you have a substantial body of work, it doesn't matter what it is. It can be Moby Dick. When you're going to translate these huge works into another language, some things do not work well in translation.
Right. And but there are ambiguities.
Exactly. And so it's impossible to say we have a perfect, infallible translation of anything. I was once in a group. Now, I'm not a King James onlyist, but I do tout King James as superior because it's based on the Textus Receptus rather than the Alexandrian manuscripts. But I was in a group with the of King James onlyists, and I was trying to explain to them there's no such thing as a perfect translation. And then, if we're going to look for perfection, then in Genesis 1:1, we're going to be let down because we're told in the beginning God created the heaven singular, and the earth. When the words are actually Hashamayim, which is the plural for heaven.
Right.
So, now there are some versions that have that right. So, and there's little things that are easy to overlook that doesn't make a difference. I think it does. It's not that it's a salvational thing. It's
Right.
not going to affect your salvation. But the fact is, it's not perfect.
Right.
So these guys were saying the scripture that refers to when that which is perfect shall come, then all these things that are done in part will be done away with. And they were saying the King James Version was that which is perfect has come. And I was, how can you say that? This is a translation. The original manuscripts existed before them. Well, why, if you're going to say anything's perfect, why not them? Why the King James? And I was trying to teach them that you cannot turn the King James Bible into an idol. And some people will actually do that. Now, I love the King James Version, and I would never slam it. I would never degrade it. I would always uphold it as what I think is the superior English version. But at the same time, we have to be very careful because we can idolize things rather than God or the message of His Word. So I think that's where we really need to be careful when it comes to something like that. But at the same time, we have to be very careful to esteem God's Word. And to, because the overall message, I believe, is infallible.
That's right.
I believe the original manuscripts were infallible. And it's because of this that we have so many other things that can be taken from it. So it's not really that fine a line. It's just understanding, I think.
Yeah.
And rightly dividing.
Yes.
So, do you think this war on God's Word is continuing today?
Oh yeah. Oh definitely. Oh, my gosh, the world is in a horrendous state that when you're hearing in the news people actually referring to mass formation psychosis as the probable psychological state of most people today, because they have been basically brainwashed and turned into fear bots, right? We're in a state where really demonic activity is one of the better explanations for how we got here. And not the only thing, obviously, but as a driving engine, maybe, perhaps, that was using whatever natural problems that we have and really just bringing them all to a head in a certain way. It looks like more than typical human evil, because we have dealt with typical human evil always, and this is on a level that what we're going through now is on a level that really rivals what happened in Nazi Germany. Really rivals it. I'm not talking about in terms of people being put in death camps, although that is happening and dying by the millions. Although people are dying by the millions now, and that probably was engineered. So, not just that, but also the peculiar evils that had to be perpetrated to set the stage for this, and the kinds of men who were doing. You can see parallels with certain Nazi figures, and I don't want to say names because your channel will get booted, right?
Yes.
So But I mean, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about.
Yes, absolutely. You know, it's funny you're saying this too, because I have a particular theory regarding the daughter of Babylon from Jeremiah 50 and 51, and Mystery Babylon of Revelation 17 and 18. And I'm open to people that disagree with me. I really don't. I you know I'm fine with that. But my own personal belief is that the only one that can possibly. I've got a lot of friends, by the way, that try to say Mystery Babylon is the Catholic Church, and I argue that with them because I don't think it can be. But my personal belief is that she's America, the USA. The interesting thing is, you're talking about a madness that's going through the world right now. There's an interesting thing in Jeremiah chapter 51, verse 7. Babylon, which this would be the daughter of Babylon that is speaking of, has been a golden cup in the Lord's hand that made all the earth drunken. The nations have drunken of her wine, therefore the nations are mad, insane, crazy, and
Okay, that is interesting.
yeah,
That is very apropos. Yeah, I definitely see a certain fulfillment to what's happening now. That even if that's not the final fulfillment, it's one of them. It's one of those. It's because you see that in the Old Testament there are three fulfillments
yes,
before Christ sort of gathers it together into himself and says, "Now I'm making this wholly mine, and I'm going to fulfill it totally." But there would be previous fulfillments, little sort of pre-echoes to what happened, and this looks like either the fulfillment or one of the pre-echoes before it
hmm
finally gets done.
I believe that a lot of prophecy is what I refer to as a rolling prophecy, and that it rolls around time after time after time after time to be fulfilled again and again, and that all of these rolling prophecies are rolling to the end and the final, uh, and that like the birth pangs of the that we're told end time signs will be as they increase in intensity and frequency, that they're all rolling toward that last fulfillment, which is going to be the optimum fulfillment, the most devastating fulfillment of all the prophecies that are rolling to the end through time. Of course, that's just a personal philosophy, and I don't I don't get offended when people disagree with me on things like that. But I do think it's a very uh, to take that point of view and see these things happen again and again. I do think it's kind of not ironic, but I think it's hard to see these things not all pushing us to some sort of culmination of huge evil events that are going to be taking place very soon, because evil does seem to be overtaking this world, and there's only one end to evil, brother, and that's in my opinion destruction. uh, no matter what the evil is, it all leads to a destruction. So when we have the nations going mad and civilization going mad, people are no longer civil with one another. We have look at the cancel cultures, for instance. There is so much hatred. Christians are ridiculed as being hateful, and we have a hateful God that did all those terrible things to people through history. They say, and yet look at what they do to one another. Those very same people making these very same judgments. Go figure.
Mm-hmm.
But okay, so getting back to this political and corrupt conspiracy that we're talking about to take away or to put doubt into the minds and hearts of people regarding the Gospels, who wrote them, in what order they were written, etc. And I think the authorship is more important than the order, but yet I believe both are important. Truth is important, period,
Right.
in my book. But I think that the trying to cast doubt on the authorship is a hideous wrong being done and perpetrated against people. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Particularly because the motivation behind it was so ignoble, so awful. I mean, there's no redeeming quality to it. Um, so it's not even like, well, we care about the truth, but this is just how it is. No, that's not like that. It's not like that. They're more like, we care about our own power and diminishing the power of the people of faith, and that's what we care about. And so that's how we're doing it. And yeah, I mean, there's nothing good to be said for it.
so how do you recommend if somebody is watching this and they just don't want to take our word for it? I'm fine with that.
Right.
What would you recommend for these people if they're searching for the truth?
Okay. Well, I did mention Peabody's this. There's also others, and it's not just, I'm not just going to recommend reading certain books. I'm just going to start with that. Okay. So there's others. So John Wenham's Redating Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Okay. And this is really a great classic. History and Criticism of the Markan Hypothesis. So this is good, and so is Biblical Criticism on Trial by Ida Linneman. Okay. Now, but one thing I want to give your viewers, your listeners, is a little taste of how you can sort of think through these problems on your own, even without buying the books, which is nice to be able to do that. And then if you buy the books, it's like, oh, this is just like what Kevin said I could do, on my own. But it's all laid out for me here, but I understand it. So here's a for instance. So let's say you want to know, okay, so who wrote what first? Let's figure this out. And how can I know that just from reading the text? How can I, or at least get a really good idea of what's plausible, what's likely? So if you want to do that, and I was trying to get together some texts as a sample. So the previous scholarly consensus prior to Markan priority, prior to a fringe theory like Markan priority coming to the fore, was that of Johann Griesbach, and his theory was that Mark was a conflation of Matthew and Luke, and he had really good scholarly reasons from the text itself, right, to support that. Okay, and so I wanted to go over some of those because I think that could be helpful.
Sure.
All right. So I want to start with the first chapter of Mark. Okay, and in the first chapter of Mark, I want to take you to verse. So I want to take you to the pericope of, let's see, where am I? Where Peter's mother-in-law was sick, and then Jesus heals her. Okay. Because then we have some interesting stuff that we're going to be able to see that'll help confirm, or at least render pretty plausible, the idea that Mark drew from Matthew and Luke, not the other way around. Okay.
Okay.
So let's start with that. I'm going to use the King James Version just because I like it too. All right.
Okay.
So we'll start with verse 28 from Mark 1. And immediately his fame spread abroad throughout all the region about Galilee, and forthwith when they were come out of the synagogue, they entered into the house of Simon and Andrew, James and John, and James and John. But Simon's wife's mother lay sick with a fever, and anon they tell him of her. And he came, and I guess we're talking about Jesus now, came and took her by the hand and lifted her up. And immediately the fever left her, and she ministered to them. Okay, so here's where we're going to get to the nitty-gritty. I mean, that was a good that was a good thing in itself. But now we're going to get to the part where it's relevant to what we were talking about. So starting at verse 32, and at evening, when the sun did set, they brought unto him all that were diseased, and them that were possessed with devils. And all the city was gathered together at the door, and he healed many that were sick of divers diseases, and cast out many devils, and suffered not the devils to speak, because they knew him. Okay, so that's how Mark tells it. Okay, in the King James Version, that's how Mark tells it. Now we're going to go to Matthew, I believe it's Matthew 4, where we get the we get Matthew's version of the same pericope, and I'm going to click onto that because I was trying to, while we were talking, I was trying to get all that together. And at first I was looking for the episode with the Gadarene demonic, where I was going to use that as the example, but that I realized when I was looking at it, no, that's not the best one. So I thought of a better one, and so, but consequently now I have to click to it while we're talking. So okay, so I'm in Bible Gateway now, and okay, so I'm in the King James Version of Matthew 4, and it starts with the Spirit leading him into the wilderness to be tempted, and then Jesus hears that John's cast into prison. He departs to Galilee. All right, and hold on. Then all about in Galilee. All right, here we go. Then Jesus went about all Galilee, teaching in their synagogues and preaching the gospel of the kingdom, and healing all manner of sickness and all manner of disease among the people. And his fame went throughout all Syria, and they brought unto him all sick people that were taken with diverse diseases and torments, and those which were possessed with devils, and those which were lunatic, and those that had the palsy, and he healed them. And there followed him great multitudes of people from Galilee, and from Decapolis, and from Jerusalem, and from Judea, and from beyond Jordan. That's the end of Matthew chapter 4. So you can hear some of the what we already heard in Mark, also in Matthew. So
it seems to me if what they're saying is true, then we would have the two texts you just read would have been reversed, and we would have read that vague version coming from Mark.
Yes, well, that is one way of seeing that, but it gets even more dramatic when we compare it to Luke. So I want to get to hold on. So the Jesus healing them. I'm going to look up because I don't have the thing in front of me. And if I had a Bible, I would probably have it, but I would be fumbling because when I'm under pressure and I get nervous, I can't ever find the thing that I'm looking for.
That's okay.
Jesus healing them. Hold on. Jesus healing the multitudes. Luke. So that's what I'm looking up right now while we're talking. So you're hearing how I do the magic, right? This is under the hood. Jesus healing the multitudes. Hold on, multitudes. Luke. All right, so let's see what we come up with, because I know that there is a parallel in Luke. And right. Okay, so here we go. Jesus. Okay, so it's Luke 6. So I'm just gonna go to Luke 6 King James Version. Keep the text, the translation consistent. Luke 6 KJV. Okay, and clicking enter. So it's going to take its time because that's what my internet connection does. But
that's
when
okay.
it finally,
let me just reiterate for everybody while you're looking for that what we're seeing here is something amazing that I never would have thought myself, and I want to thank you for showing us this, Kevin. What we're seeing is that Matthew and Luke are the longer books, but they're just touching on these events right here. And when Mark was written, he was taking what Matthew and Luke had said, and he expounded.
He conflates them. He brings them together.
And expands on them, giving us details that we don't see in Matthew or Luke. So I think that's that's a good indication that Mark was written later and drew on Matthew and Luke.
The most dramatic way we're going to see it, and I'll be telling you in a second because I'm in Luke 6 now, is how the very words that Mark uses are words that are in Matthew and words that are in Luke, whole phrase constructions that he just smashes together.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes awkwardly, just to have them both, just for the purpose of having them both, even if it doesn't work as well.
As he's expanding on the details.
Right. And there's a Don Bernard Archer had a theory that I'll tell after I've finished this part of it about why exactly Mark did that, what exactly was happening, and it's there's no way to prove it. It's not really a theory, barely a hypothesis. It's just a narrative, but it's as good as any narrative that the skeptics can come up with because they have no evidence either.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Well, it makes better sense than the reverse, though.
When you hear it, you'll be like, there's no evidence for that, but I believe it. I think you will. Hang on. So, hang on one second. So I'm in Luke 6, and I'm trying to, and my computer is giving me a hard time.
That's okay.
I can't scroll down. It won't let me scroll down. This is very aggravating.
That's okay. Take your time with it.
All right.
So basically, what we're seeing while Kevin is pulling this up.
I may have to go into the other room and actually get a print Bible.
That's okay. That's okay.
All right, hold on. Give me a second.
Okay.
Because this is not. It's now going really, really slow, and it's like inching and inching. It's like we could wait another 5 minutes to get to where I want it to be.
That's quite all right. So what we're actually seeing here, my friends, we're seeing that their insistence that Mark was written first and that none of these Gospels were written by the 4 apostles. We're seeing that it's very apparent that Mark was written. We have Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. But it seems like Mark was one of the last books written, and that he actually drew from Matthew and Luke. And but this shows us too that the authorship was definitely apostolic. The apostles wrote these accounts, and we saw that down through history, from the 1st century on up to the Middle Ages, on up through the Middle Ages, there is no controversy about the authorship of these books. So, go ahead, brother. And
okay, I'm ready. So, all right. So this is Jesus heals a great multitude, and this is how Luke has it. Okay. Starting with verse 17, and now unfortunately I'm going to have to use the New King James here because I don't have the King James in front of me. And he came down with them and stood on a level place with a crowd of his disciples and a great multitude of people from all Judea and Jerusalem and from the seacoast of Tyre and Sidon, who came to hear him and be healed of their diseases, as well as those who were tormented with unclean spirits. And they were healed, and the whole multitude sought to touch him, for power went out from him and healed them all. Okay, so that's how Luke tells it. Now let's compare. Now here's where the magic happens. So we've got. I can just get this. All right. So I'm gonna have to just flip back and forth in the actual paper in front of me because technology and me, we don't go together. We're not friends.
I can relate to that.
So I just read Luke. All right. So I'm now going to go back to Matthew, and then we're going to go back to Mark, and then I'm going to show you how Mark takes word constructions for whole phrases, lifts whole phrases from Matthew and from Luke, and slams them together. Right. Just patches them together, even if it's awkward. Just as if on principle, he needs both of them. Right. Okay. So Matthew 4. I'll probably find Mark 1 and put my finger there. Mark 1, cast out the unclean spirit. Okay, here, many healed after Sabbath and sunset. All right, so Matthew, now I'm going to go to Matthew 4. Is Matthew 4? Yes, yeah. Matthew 4. All right, so Matthew 4, he begins his Galilean ministry, he heals a great multitude. Here we go. Okay, so Jesus went about all Galilee, teaching in their synagogues, the gospel of the kingdom, and healing all kinds of sickness and all kinds of disease among the people. Then his fame went throughout all Syria, and they brought him all people who were afflicted with various diseases and torments, and those who were demon-possessed, epileptics, paralytics, and he healed them. Great multitudes followed him from Galilee, Decapolis, Jerusalem, Judea, and beyond the Jordan. That's Matthew. And again, now Luke. Okay. Okay, so multitude from all Jerusalem and Judea and Jerusalem, Tyre and Sidon, who came to him and be healed of their diseases, as well as those who were tormented with unclean spirits. So that's Matthew and Luke. Now, here's Mark. Okay. All right. So at evening, when the sun set, hold on. Okay, because this is messing me up, because what I remember is that when Matthew, where is it? I'm losing my mind here. Okay, this demonstration is not going as the way I intended it, because I remember when I was studying this at first, Mark had took at evening and when the sun had set, from one from Mark and one from Matthew and one from Luke. Yeah. But I'm not seeing them in those other pericopes. So I might even have the wrong narratives here, and this is just frustrating.
Well, no, I think that the difference may be in the version itself. There are slight differences in the version.
Yeah, that's okay. It could be just the way they're because really the most dramatic way to see it is in the Greek. But yes. I don't have an interlinear in front of me, and if I did, what am I going to do? Stick it in front of the camera?
That's okay. I think
unfortunately, this demonstration didn't work out the way I wanted it to. But in Mark, in that pericope of Mark, maybe I'm taking the wrong text from Matthew and Luke. I don't know, but I remember that when Mark does it, he takes phrases from Matthew and Luke and he puts them together. So like at evening and when the sun set, I remember that in one pericope, it says in the evening, and in the other gospel, and whether it was Luke or whether it was Matthew, but the other one of the two, it said when sun was set, and so Mark took them both. Yeah. It said when evening, the sun did set, and so there are these, concrete phrases that you see in Mark where it says that they were sick with various diseases and they were possessed with devils, and the Greek phrases that they're pulling from are exact from others gospels, that Mark is just using them. He's just lifting them. It's as if he's quoting them while he's coming up with his own version of the narrative. And I wish I could just get it. I didn't have this set up the way I wanted to, because I was going to use another pericope to show it, and maybe I should have used that one. Maybe I should have used the Gadarene demonic.
Well, that's okay. That's okay. I think that the important thing that we see here is the fact that both of these things Matthew and Luke are just touching on, but Mark goes into greater detail. He's pulling the story from Matthew and Luke possibly, but going into much greater detail. That this all started at Peter's house with his mother, our mother-in-law. So Luke says right here in Luke chapter 1, For as much as many have taken in hand to set forth in order a declaration of those things which are most surely believed among us, even as they were delivered, they delivered them unto us, which from the beginning were eyewitnesses and ministers of the word. Luke is telling us right here, these things were written by eyewitnesses, the people that were there. Now,
Yeah.
I think that's a very important factor here, something that we have to take into consideration. Luke is telling us, look, these were eyewitnesses, the people that have sat down beforehand and told you about these things. These were eyewitnesses, and now I'm here to tell you. You know, he's writing to his friend, evidently wanting to convert his friend. So I think that's a very important part. And then when you get to the fact that Mark is expanding on the things, there's a certain order that these things are written in. And when you see that order, and then you see Mark expanding on those things, in my opinion, had it been in the reverse and Mark was copying from them, he would have been copying those details. Those details would have been copied from these other books. But no, these are eyewitness accounts. And so when Mark is relaying these things to us, he's saying, yeah, I remember that, but this is where it all started. It started at Peter's house with his mother-in-law. So we don't get that detail from Matthew. Now, Matthew didn't see, these men are speaking under the leading and inspiration of the Holy Spirit, but Mark felt impressed to go into much greater detail here. So Mark is the shortest book because he doesn't go into as many of the incidents in the life of Christ as Matthew and Luke. Isn't that true?
I believe that. And yeah. Yes. Well, that's yeah. I think that's a good observation. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So there, I think one of the things that is damning modern criticism more than anything, though, is the lack of controversy we have through history. From the first century, from Polycarp on down through Irenaeus, Eusebius, and all of these other people that have written about these things, we have testament that there was no controversy in this arena until somebody developed the controversy and introduced it into the church clear up in the 1800s. So we're talking past the Middle Ages here.
Yeah.
And we're talking about a time, too, when they were casting doubt on the Old Testament, the New Testament, and esteeming the Alexandrian manuscripts as the oldest and most reliable manuscripts, and trying to replace the Textus Receptus. Now, just a quick note, the Alexandrian manuscripts are neither the oldest nor the most reliable. A lot of people aren't aware of this, but the writing in these manuscripts, there's only like you have the two codexes that it's mostly based on. There's 27 fragments and manuscripts that these are based on, 27 total, which is why it's called the minority text. They say, well, P52 is the oldest fragment, and it's definitely Alexandrian. Well, I'd like to see how they prove it's Alexandrian, number one. And number two, you can't date these things from a photograph, and that's exactly what they did. The truth
Eric, I found I was on the wrong text from Matthew, and I just found it. It's in chapter 8.
Okay.
So If you don't mind my
Yeah,
rounding this
sure.
out.
Go
Okay.
right ahead.
All right. Thanks. Yeah. I mean, I was really vexed because that thing in Matthew 4 sure looks like it. It's not. It's not
That,
it. Um. So, but it's in Matthew 8, and it starts okay. So in here in Matthew, we're they're at Peter's house, and he just healed Peter's mother-in-law again. Just it's in Matthew, just as in it is in uh I can't remember which gospel carries that part of the narrative. Again, I don't remember if it was Mark or Luke, but it's in Matthew here. And so he touched her, the people left her, she rose, ministered to them. Okay, and so then Matthew says, when the evening had come, they brought unto him many that were possessed with devils. Okay, so that's okay, and I might even have the wrong text in Luke too, because I might have had the parallel to the wrong text in Matthew in Luke too, and I might need to go to Luke 4. I think we need to go to Luke 4. I should have had this thing in front of me the whole time.
that's okay.
So hold on. So in Matthew, anyway, so back to Matthew. Matthew says, when the even was come, they brought unto him many that were possessed with devils, and he cast out the spirits with his word and healed all that were sick. Okay. Now that's how it's Matthew says that says what happened there. And now I'm going to go to how we see it in Luke, the same thing. So, all right, went to the in synagogues. Hold on, the Spirit came. All right, hold on. I think it's down in verse 38. Rose out of the synagogue, entered into Simon's house. Simon's wife's mother was there, taken with fever. He stood over, rebuked the fever. Now, okay, so here it is. Now, when the sun was setting, they all they that had me sick with diverse diseases brought them unto him, and he laid his hands on them, and every one of them, and healed them. So that's verse 40 of Luke 4. So you have Matthew, where it says the evening had come. And they brought unto him many that were possessed with devils, and he cast out the spirits and healed all the sick. That's Matthew. In Luke, we have, now when the sun was setting, all they that had sick with diverse diseases brought them unto him, and he laid his hands on every one of them and healed them. That's Matthew, and that's Luke. Now let's go back to Mark and see how Mark uses both of them, using the same words, the very same phrases. Like if this was supposed to be original, he would have gotten an F for plagiarism, for not citing his sources. So because it's that obvious. So anyway, back to Mark. We went to, hold on, I lost the verse. Here it is. Okay. So remember, Matthew, it was in the evening, and in Luke, I think it was Luke, not unless it was the other way around. The sun had gone down, right? So now, just even though it's awkward, and you don't have to say both because it's redundant, Mark says, at evening, when the sun did set, they brought unto him all that were diseased and them that were possessed with devils. Now, in Matthew and in Luke, one emphasizes the sick, the other emphasizes the demon-possessed, and Mark talks about both of them. And he says it happened at evening when the sun did set. Okay? So you see how he's using texts from both Matthew and Luke and just jamming them together. And even if it's awkward, he's got to get them both in there. Okay?
Yeah.
And he healed many that were sick of diverse diseases. This is who said diverse diseases? Which one? Hold on. Was that Matthew or was that Luke? I'm trying to. This thing is going very slow. And when I need it to go fast, it goes slow. That's the frustrating part. But one of the synoptic authors uses that characteristic phrase, diverse diseases. Is that Matthew? Hold on. Yes, all they that had sick with diverse diseases. Okay, now that's English, right? But that's based on a Greek text. It's based on Greek phraseology that when you go into an interlinear, you see them there, and they're exactly identical. Okay,
Yeah.
every single letter. All right. Oh no, sorry, that was Luke. I'm in Luke. So diverse diseases is Luke, and in Matthew, it'll say something else that's just very Matthean, and Mark uses both. So in Matthew, it says many that were possessed with devils. Okay, so you see how Mark is using these phrases from both of them. You can see how he's taking these two pericopes and just conflating them together. Okay, so even though it comes out a little bit awkward, he still has to do it. Now, why do that? Why does Mark do that? And Dom Barnard Orchard had a very interesting literary theory of the origin of Mark, because Mark is the secretary of Peter, and Peter has a certain preeminence as the chief apostle, right? So what happens is Matthew comes out with his gospel, and it's like, oh, this is great. Okay, now Luke is like, others have written about him, and I think that's probably because John was writing too at roughly the same time. I really think John came out early. So he says many others have written, so I'm going to write too. And Luke is using, I believe, primarily using Matthew as a source, but has his own take on it. And now what happens is, once Luke comes out with his, people are like, okay, so what should we do with this? Is this as good as Matthew? Not as good? Is this like supplemental material? I mean, they don't look like they perfectly agree. There seems to be, Luke seems to have a different take on certain things. Is he contradicting Matthew? Is that how we have to read it? Is he wrong? Is Matthew wrong? And so what Peter does, according to Father Orchard, was he comes out there to preach a sermon, and he puts both Matthew's and Luke's account, and he starts reading from both of them and alternating. And Mark is his secretary, writing down the whole thing. And that's the Gospel of Mark.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I'm glad you found that, because that does make a lot of sense there. That's a perfect illustration. Um, so the order is important only if you are interested in the truth. What order were they written in? Now, when I think that the overall great lesson here, though, is the apostolic authorship of these. So that is even though the date, I think it's important as far as truth is concerned. And what Kevin just showed us makes perfect sense. It's a perfect illustration. But even more so, we can have faith that these were written by the apostles as they are attributed in your Bible. And that the accusation that these are not written by the apostles is just completely unfounded. And it is intended, in my opinion, this is a satanic ploy to step on your faith and to weaken it. And we see that all through time. Now, if you notice, not only did we have people trying to shake your faith back in the 1860s, 70s, and 80s, this was the time when this controversy arose, and we don't see it anywhere in history before this. This is the time when the controversy about the Mosaic books, Genesis, Exodus, Deuteronomy, Leviticus, etc. When that controversy came up, trying to say Moses was not the author, this is the time when Westcott and Hort were trying to shake your faith and giving us their Greek version taken from the Alexandrian manuscripts. And oddly enough, this is exactly the same time frame. We're talking about evolution rising to shake your faith. So we have all of these things, man, happening, and one, 30, 40 year span of time that is meant to shake your faith.
Yeah.
So, if that's not a war on faith, brother, I don't
Right.
know what is. That is a satanic war. So
Right.
you can be
Yeah.
confident that
Yeah.
the apostles wrote these things. You can be confident that this is the word of God. You can be confident that the Textus Receptus is the best version that we have today. You can be confident of all these things as far as the English version is concerned, in my opinion.
Right.
You can be confident of all these things, my friend, and you can be proud that you're a Christian.
Right. Yes, because the facts they're not they don't run contrary to the facts.
Amen.
The evidence is the strict evidence is sparse on either side when it comes to how you can confirm it. And that's why where faith comes in. But what we don't have is we don't have to climb up a hill of going against the known facts and believing in the teeth of them. We do not. So now when you hear like the thing that I just went over as an example of, there's so many other examples of how let me get that lined up, how Mark used Matthew and Luke, so many others. And when you see them, and when you see them in the Greek, okay, you can't unsee them. And then when some, Yahoo with a degree, I don't care what professor, whatever, if he says, well, Mark was first because it's the shortest, you're going to be like, you're an idiot.
Yeah, you know,
Because that's not a good argument at
that's right.
all. It's not good.
I
It's not.
agree.
It's certainly not a fact.
Yes.
Okay, no matter what they say, it's not a fact.
And, if I were to recommend, challenge folks, I would recommend that you take these naysayers that would wreck your faith and tell them to show you the controversy through history.
They don't want
From
to do that. They don't want to teach the controversy.
That's right. Show me the controversy from the first century, the second century, the third century, on up through the Middle Ages. Show me that controversy before
Right.
the
Yeah.
1800s.
That's right. Tell them, hey, I can come to good conclusions just like you. I have a mind just like you. Show me the evidence and show me how this all hashed out so that it came to uh, a consensus to be what you said. How is that consensus reached?
Yes.
Yeah, let's say and see if they tell you. But they'll probably tell you a false narrative
Yeah.
rather than just say, oh, I can't tell you that. They're like 50-50. They'll say, well, no, I'm just not going to bother with you. But the other 50% is that they'll tell you some false narrative that they themselves believe, that they were sold on.
Yeah. Something I get a lot when I challenge people to show me the facts. They say, "Oh, I'm not paid to educate you." Okay. Well, then shut up.
Exactly.
And
Now, if we ever wind up doing a follow up, it's all going on 2 hours, so we don't want to stretch this any further. But if we ever do a follow up, because we just did some New Testament stuff, um, I could go into some more detail, buttressing in a similar fashion using the text. So you could see with your own eyes, just like we saw with our own eyes, how Mark was using Matthew and Luke in a particular in one of his particular pericopes, and just it's just practically plagiarizing them, if you want to put it that way.
yeah,
Um,
absolutely. That would make a great
but
program.
what I would do is, if we ever do a follow up, I will go over some very interesting things from the texts of the what they call the Pentateuch, the Torah, to show Mosaic authorship, how supposedly in narratives that supposedly interweave these other authors of J and E and D and P, the Yahwist and the Elohist and the Priestlies and all that stuff. How instead what you have in particular narratives, you have one literary unity where it has a certain structure that could not have been amalgamated together out of all these different human authors, but there was one inspired author, one inspired human author, and I'm going to show you just to whet your appetite for it, a a shape that you can picture in your head, and that will be the structure that I'm talking about, that I would be talking about in whatever follow up we do. So imagine a step pyramid where it goes up step, 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 step to a top. So you have all these steps, and they're all in patterns. It's there, and then it builds up. So you would go up and then go down, right? You go up the steps and then go down. Go step, 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 and then down, down, down. The same steps that would go up, it would then go down. Okay, that's the shape that I'm talking about. That structures many particular chapters of the various books in the first 5 books of the Bible, where supposedly you had all of these different authors and a final editor slapping them together and making just taking the mess and making the best of the mess, right? And then you see, no, there is definitely a literary unity. This thing is structured, and the structure is like a step pyramid.
That's interesting.
So when you do a follow-up, that's what I'm going to do.
Yeah, and I would love for you to pull some of these together, and maybe we can do a little bit on each of them. Do an hour on the New Testament and an hour on the Old Testament. I think that would be amazing to put this together for people, and it would be a great service.
Right.
So let me know when you'd want to do that, and we will do it, brother.
Sounds good. All right. I'll have to get back to you, but I'll get back to you soon.
Okay, I appreciate that. And listen, folks, we're going on the 2-hour mark, and we don't want to wear you out. We thank you for joining us. Thank you for listening in. Thank you for your comments. And if you could give Kevin a thumbs up here, I would appreciate that. He's a good friend. I want to thank you, Kevin, for being here today. It's my pleasure. Love you, brother, very much. And we just want to thank everybody. So God bless you all, and God bless you. God keep you, and thank you very much. We're going to be doing a couple of broadcasts coming up here. Tomorrow we're going to be going in to the war that Nemesis started. And, I feel sorry for those guys because there's only 50 of them, and they seem to be wearing out. But God is good, brother. God just, He'll stand for you. You know what I'm saying? And then we have another one about the debate. We've done a lot of debates, Kevin, with a lot of people in the past. And I recently did a debate with an atheist who keeps trying to say he won. You can see some of his comments on the Craig Venter video I put up. It's just like a 8 or 10 minute video, but he's making comments in the comments section trying to cover his butt, buddy. He tried to say Craig Venter never said that there is no tree of life of common descent, and that genetics proves that. And then he tried to say
Nobody in the world would dispute that. I mean,
yeah.
In the academic world, they don't dispute that. They're just like, well, we know better now.
Yeah.
So what?
Well, he claims that Richard Dawkins corrected Craig Venter on genetics, as ridiculous as that is. So you can see him really reaching and trying. But, in that video that we did on another channel, they had to actually protect this guy because he was losing it badly. When I started to do the cross-examination, his eyes were like this. His face was all downcast. He was worried, brother. He was in trouble. Everybody knew it. So they had to try to protect him.
Well, you committed the cardinal sin of not being a moron. You see, that's what you were supposed to do. That was your job. You had one job.
Well, he's we're going to be doing a program on some of the things that he got wrong in his debate because they wouldn't give me time to prove these things wrong in the actual debate. So this fellow didn't know what the three domains of life were, and he called them families. And when it comes down to the Luca, the last universal common ancestor, he says, well, that's not the original purveyor of all life. Now, I wanted to say, but they wouldn't let me, of course not, moron. The original purveyor of all life would not be the last common ancestor, universal common ancestor. But they wouldn't let me say that. And they wouldn't let me correct them on a lot of things there. So, anyway, that's the two upcoming. And then we have another special with Brother Doran. You know Doran.
Yes.
He's going to be coming on, I believe it's the following next Friday. And we're going to be speaking about science and what separates science from science fiction. So that should be good. Because when it comes down to what separates science from science fiction, this is what proves evolution wrong. So I'm looking forward to these programs. And you let me know, brother, when you are ready for this, the New Testament and the Old Testament comparisons there, and we will bring it back on. We will concentrate on these and give the people.
I'll probably have one or two more interesting conflations that Mark uses for Matthew and Luke, and I'll have them ready. Which I didn't think I was going to. I didn't realize how necessary that was going to be.
That's okay, brother. That's okay. I'm sorry to catch you off guard. That was my fault.
No, that was all my fault. I thought I was ready, and I wasn't as ready as I thought. But I think it worked out fine anyway, and thank God.
It absolutely did. Well, thank you, Kevin. You have a great evening, and God bless you all. This is Eric and Kevin. God bless you all. We are out, my friends. Take care. See you next time.